A green glowing sword, an adventure in space. What comes to mind when you think of that? Star Wars? No, how about the new adventures of He-Man? Recently, I found a Masterverse version of He-Man from the new adventures of He-Man, which was like a 1990s attempt to keep the magic of He-Man going. The Masterverse figures are really interesting to me. They are like a 7-inch scale, which is slightly bigger than a lot of the 6-inch scale stuff that I normally collect, but I like the idea of like moving these figures into like a new, more modern direction, kind of like the G.I. Joe classified stuff, but also like retaining a lot of what worked about some of the classic designs. I was the prime age in 1990 to continue some adventures with He-Man, and when he had like a green glowing sword and going off into space, like that was really exciting. While I found this somewhat beat up package, I knew that I had to get this figure home and add him to my collection because I do have a small yet growing Masterverse collection. So let's start with an overview of the figure. So first we get He-Man, and he comes with his sword, he comes with this green energy buckler, he also has 2 punching fists. As we know, Skeletor couldn't leave He-Man alone in space. Now, what's interesting about this figure is that when I got him out of the package, his head is like super wobbly. I don't know what happened there, but it doesn't really sit on his neck all of that well. It's a secure fit, but it's just like super wobbly. Now, also the face sculpt. He looks very Ken-like, which, I mean, again, it makes sense. Like, Mattel makes Barbie, Mattel makes He-Man. But it's like a very interesting look at He-Man where he's usually like a little more goofy, or he's like a little more like classically barbarian. This feels a little more glam, which probably fits the early 90s anyway. Now his buckle had some kind of weird paint application, and the upper torso does swivel really well, but we don't get a lot of movement in the upper torso, just enough to kind of get like a little crunch forward, but not anything like backwards at all. Now the lower half, we have the legs kind of kicking out. He could do a mean splits. We have a cut at the upper thigh, and we also have a boot swivel here. The ankles go back and forward, and the ankles can swivel a little bit as well. Now, if you're thinking, cool, it's got double joints. Yeah, that's awesome, but because He-Man has such beefy biceps, you're not gonna get like a huge range. His own muscles are getting in the way. Same when it comes to his knees. We're not getting like his thighs in the way. It's more so the boots that are, I guess, very pirate inspired. Now, most noticeable are his arms that can never rest at his sides. They're always like halfway out like that. We do get a good T-pose with the shoulders, but not having his arms be at rest means that he's going to have to take a pose of some kind, which means that to display him, he's going to have to take a pose of some kind. That sometimes doesn't work if you have a lot of figures and not a lot of space. But we did leave out a few accessories because he comes with additional armor. He comes with a helmet as well as like some giant old school computer that he can use as some battle armor. It was difficult to remove the armor, or I guess like chest plate that comes on the figure and then put on the new armor. So you have to remove the head, you have to put on the armor, then clamshell it back together, put the head back on, and do it in reverse if you want to get him to look the way that he came out of the packaging. The helmet does kind of look goofy on him, but I think that's also part of the charm because you cannot take He-Man too entirely seriously. There's always just like a slight goofiness to the entire Masters of the Universe world. But things are thoughtfully done. No matter which armor that you choose to put on He-Man, you are getting a place to store the sword. You're not necessarily getting a place to store the shield. It's always going to have to socket into this bracer. For now, let's get him into a couple poses, talk about whether or not you need to take a new adventure to the store, try to track one of these down. Now, this particular version of the figure that I found had some defects with the paint, noticeably on the buckle, as well as like just a really wobbly head. That is just a little unfortunate when it comes to this, but I didn't have any other options at the store. I couldn't leaf through the pegs to try to find another one because this must just got found somewhere and then put on the clearance section. But what I like about this figure is that it encapsulates a moment in time. The popularity of the original He-Man was waning, but it was just too good of a property to let go. So what did they do? They take other different pieces of pop culture at the time and then put it into a new He-Man adventure. The translucent weapons look really good. I like this version of the Power Sword for He-Man, to be completely honest. I like the more sci-fi look. But in terms of this action figure overall, there are some issues with it. We've mentioned some of the paint, mentioned some of the head stuff, but ultimately, like the arms, they're a little limited. We get a good kind of range, but when it comes to resting the figure, I mean, that's just not gonna happen. The stock version of this character, the armor you can put on him, is a fun feature. I like having extra accessories in the box to play around with, and what I think is gonna ultimately end up happening is that I will keep him in his helmet, as well as that big giant boxy armor. Again, like, you have to appreciate this figure for the time and place that it existed in the world. And a figure like this is designed specifically for the fans who have stuck with He-Man for all of these years. I don't necessarily know that this is something that you need to run out, track down, and find, but if you come across it and you see it and you're like, huh, I remember that, then it might just be like a fun nostalgia trip to own one of these. So there's nothing extraordinary about this that pushes the Masterverse line forward. I think we're starting to see like the new Eternia stuff pop up, and that looks really cool, so hopefully I'll be able to get my hands on that at some point in the future. But ultimately, like, this guy is built for reaching a corner of your mind with a memory possibly long forgotten. And if you want to access more of those memories, well, I talk about collectibles, pop culture, action figures, blasters, all of this stuff is cool to me. And if it's cool to you, you have to hit that subscribe button to stay tuned to the Ri-Fi channel, because, I mean, this is what I talk about, and I know you're gonna like what I have coming up. That's all I know about our new adventures of He-Man. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.